The ocean can be a place of wonder and beauty. But let's face it, it's also terrifying and huge and has sharks in it, and sometimes total psychopaths set sail on it and do horrible things. And unfortunately, Terry Jo Dupperault knows this all too well. Today's tale is all about a dream vacation that ends in a total nightmare. Welcome to our channel, where we drink heavily and explore the darkest corners of humanity. The year is 1961. Meet 11-year-old Terry Jo Dupperault, born to Arthur and Jean Dupperault. She's got two siblings, an older brother named Brian, who's 14, and a younger sister named Renee, who's 7. Arthur Dupperault loves the outdoors, and he wants to give his kids this awesome experience of living on a boat and sailing around the world. So he tells his family they're going on a family cruise from Florida to the Bahamas, and they're super excited about it. Arthur had planned the week as a trial run for a month-long vacation around the world. He wanted to see if the family could handle living on the water in case they ever want to live on a boat someday or something. So, on November 8th, the family goes down to Fort Lauderdale. They charter a boat called the Bluebell. The boat skipper is 44-year-old former Air Force fighter pilot Julian Harvey, and he's bringing his wife, Mary Dean. Mary Dean was an aspiring writer, and she was also a great cook, and so she was appointed as chef of this luxurious cruise. The family spent several days out in the Atlantic. Everything's going great. Everyone's having a blast and living their best lives. They spend the week snorkeling, spearfishing through the crystal blue water. They're exploring uninhabited islands. They're dining on fresh seafood with the locals. Oh, they are just living. Then on November 12th, after tons of fun in the sun, they have to start their journey back to Florida. No one really knows why, but they decide to sail at night. They're like, let's see how beautiful it will be to sail in the night sky. And the family's thrilled with the idea. Terry goes to sleep in the cabin she shares with her sister while she leaves the rest of the family upstairs to enjoy the night. Terry wakes up to her brother screaming, and she knew it was one of those screams that tell you something bad is going on. She said she knew instantly that he was in danger. So like any normal person, she decides to go up to the deck to find out what's happening. As she's walking toward the screams of her brother, she walks past the kitchen and finds her brother and mother lying on the floor in a big pool of blood. Terry said she also saw blood in one area of the cockpit and a rifle. She walks back up onto the deck and is met with Julian freaking Harvey, who rushes up to her and shoves her back down the ladder and says, "Get back down there." So Terry goes back down and gets into her bed, and she just lays there. She's scared for her life. So after what seems like forever, water starts coming into her cabin. Harvey goes down into Terry's cabin with a gun in his hand. She recalls him just standing there with an angry looking expression, staring at her for a while before he then just left. In Harvey's sick mind, he didn't really have to kill her because he figures the boat is sinking and that's going to handle that for him. So Terry knows she can't stay in her cabin any longer because the water was making her mattress float. So she goes on top of the deck again, but this time she sees Captain Harvey setting a dinghy down into the water. She asks him if the boat's sinking, and he just doesn't answer. Harvey dives into the sea and catches onto the dinghy that he dropped, leaving poor little Terry in the sinking boat in the middle of the night. As Terry stands on the deck, she's like, what is going on? Her heart is pounding with fear and confusion. She cannot believe what's happening. She knows for a fact that her brother and her mother are dead. This boat is sinking, and this lunatic just jumped off the ship and abandoned her. She knows she has to act fast if she wants to survive. Without hesitation, she scrambles over the sails to the deck, where she knows a cork raft is tied to the boat. She unties it and throws it over the side into the sea and gets in it. But the rope that tied the raft on board is still attached to the ship, so it's pulling her under the sinking ship unless she can untie it in time. Alone and in the darkness, she has to save herself, and fast. She succeeds in freeing her raft from the sinking Bluebell. On November 13th, a crew member on an oil tanker notices a man frantically waving from his dinghy. The man yells, "Help! I have a dead baby on board!" The ship crew pulls the man aboard, and they notice the dead body of a red-haired young girl wearing a life jacket lying on the floor of the dinghy. The man introduces himself as, Captain Julian Harvey, the skipper of the Bluebell. He informs the crew that the Bluebell ship was hit by a strong squall at 8:30 p.m. the previous day, causing the ship to keel over and the main mast to snap. He explains that he was separated from the other passengers and was forced to abandon the sinking ship. He says he was unable to save any of the passengers, including his wife, Mary Dean. Meanwhile, Terry Jo wakes up floating alone in the ocean. The morning finally comes and she feels relieved because she can kind of see what's going on around her finally, but she realizes she's surrounded by water in all directions and Captain Harvey is nowhere to be found. She's sitting in a cork raft with interlaced rope at the bottom, so the only position she could be in was sitting. Parrotfish begin picking at her feet through the rope as her legs dangled into the sea. Her feet are bleeding, the sun is beating down on her, and there's nothing she can do. Hours pass, and she's starting to question her ability to survive without food or water. She tries to focus on seeing any ship or plane on the horizon. I mean, surely someone's got to be aware that the ship has sunk, and people will likely come soon to check for survivors and save her or something, right? So Terry's got to stay seated straight up even as night falls. Despite her efforts to stay awake, she's exhausted, and her mind is drifting in and out of consciousness. At one point, she said she had dreamed of seeing blue lights of an airport and her parents were standing and waiting for her at the end of the landing strip. So she jumps out of the raft and into the water thinking she's about to run into them or something, and then quickly comes back to reality. She's stuck in the ocean. Fortunately, she hadn't let go of the raft, so she scrambles back into it. And that was the moment she said she realized sleeping was dangerous and that she was going to have to stay awake in order to stay alive. November 14th. Terry notices a small red plane circling overhead as dawn breaks. She's convinced she's about to be rescued, but there's only one problem. The life raft that Terry's sitting on is white, and so are all the wave caps surrounding her, so she's blending right into them. Over the next 3 days, rescue missions are sent across the sea to the area where Harvey claims the ship had sunk in hopes of finding other survivors, but they're finding nothing. And every time a ship or a plane is passing by Terry Jo, they can't see her. Meanwhile, the U.S. Coast Guard allows Harvey to return to Miami on November 15th for further questioning so he can lie some more about all the terrible things he just did. So on November 16th, little Terry Jo is clinging desperately to her life raft, fighting to stay alive after 4 long days and nights at sea. Her mind is drifting off, her lips are cracked, she's parched from dehydration, and she's flat out exhausted. She's like, I'm done. Her feet and body are aching from the constant strain of clinging to the raft. Her skin is dry and brittle. She's trying to push thoughts of rescue out of her mind. She's just thinking deep down that they're becoming less and less likely with each passing moment. And then a Greek freighter is passing through the Providence Channel in the Bahamas, and one of the men on deck is looking out across the sea and seems to see a wave cap that's not disappearing. The man is a second officer of the Greek freighter, Captain Theo, who whips out his binoculars and spots Terry. Terry is finally rescued, but at that point, she's headed straight into a coma from all the exposure and dehydration. November 17th, 5 days after the Bluebell went down, in the middle of Julie and Harvey's interrogation, a captain enters the room and announces that there's a survivor from the ship. Creepy Captain Harvey's like, oh my God, before he gathers himself and says, isn't that wonderful? His demeanor shifts dramatically and he requests to be excused from the interrogation, claiming to be tired. Harvey drives to the Sandman Hotel on Biscayne Boulevard in Miami after leaving the interrogation office, checks in under a fake name, and commits suicide by stabbing himself multiple times. While Terry Jo Dupperault is in a hospital bed in a coma, people are starting to talk about Julie and Harvey. They're like, hold up, something ain't right here. Everyone's waiting for Terry Jo's side of the story. On November 20th, Terry Jo finally wakes up and bravely spills all the tea. She recounts every single detail of her experience on the ship, including her interactions with Captain Harvey. In her account, she confirmed that everything the captain had claimed about the events on the board was a complete lie. Turns out, creepy Captain Harvey had a murky past. He had a complicated history with women, having been married multiple times before tying the knot with Mary Dean. One of Harvey's former wives died in a mysterious car accident when he was driving with her and her mother. he claimed their car crashed through a railing and plunged into a bayou, leaving Harvey as the only survivor. Although his stories about the incident were inconsistent, there was no concrete evidence of foul play. The Bluebell tragedy was also not the first time Harvey had been involved in suspicious insurance claims for destroyed boats. The 2 previous cases were decided in his favor, although he was considered shady AF. Although the exact nature and details surrounding the deaths of the Dupperault family and Mary Dean remain unknown, the motives of the acts of Julian Harvey cannot be ascertained. However, he was the sole beneficiary of Mary Dean's life insurance policy, and he was sorely in need of money. Another theory speculates that it's likely that Captain Harvey was in the process of killing his wife when perhaps he was caught by either Arthur or Jean Dupperault, and then Harvey just decided to kill everyone on board and sink the ship to hide his crimes and evidence of being involved. Terry Jo Dupperault went on to become known as the Sea Orphan. After enduring countless interrogations by the U.S. Coast Guards and relevant authorities, Terry Jo was finally taken in by her aunt and uncle. But even though she was rescued, the trauma of losing her entire family at sea would haunt her for the rest of her life. Despite everything, Terry Jo refused to see herself as a victim. Instead, she became a survivor, holding on to the hope that her father was still alive and searching for him for many years. It wasn't until she reached the age of 35 that she finally let go of that hope. Throughout her life, Terry Jo has had a deep connection with the water, feeling a strong bond with the ocean that saved her as a child. Her love for the sea led her to study regulations and zoning, working tirelessly to protect the environment, which means so much to her. Despite the challenges she faced, Terry has found happiness in her personal life. She's been married and now has 6 beautiful children. She often visits the ocean, where she feels most connected to her family. Terry's story is one of resilience, determination, and hope. Her unwavering spirit in the face of tragedy and her commitment to protecting the ocean makes her an inspiration to us all. Cheers to you, Terry Jo. You're a badass. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you don't miss a single moment. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And for the ultimate true crime experience, turn on post notifications so that you never miss a single update. Stay on the edge of your seat with us as we piece together the clues and unravel the mysteries while getting drunk. Toodaloo!